Welcome and thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Crexi Podcast, an insider's look at all things commercial real estate. In this show, we cover a broad range of topics that both cater to CRE newcomers and industry leaders alike. I'm your host, Matt Kors, a Senior Regional Director here at Crexi. At Crexi, we're a comprehensive digital commercial real estate platform designed to empower all CRE real estate professionals with the tools they need to discover and transact property. As part of the mission, the Crexi Podcast hopes to provide a window into the inner workings of commercial real estate, for this generation and the next. But today, I'm very excited to sit down with Peter Padden at James Capital Advisors. Very interesting conversation we're going to have about demystifying the cannabis industry, which is one that I've had many questions about since joining this industry quite some time ago. Quick intro on Peter. Since 2017, and the broad legalization of cannabis in the state of California, Peter has dedicated his practice of real estate to providing an institutional level of professionalism, tools, and services to the legal marijuana and hemp industries. This higher level of insight and partnership has benefited large and small cannabis businesses and landlords across 9 states, as Peter's commitment to excellence on behalf of his clients has been hard to replicate in today's brokerage marketplace. A graduate of the Villanova School of Business with a degree in finance, Peter's analytical approach to the unique mechanics of transacting cannabis real estate enables both veterans and novices in the industry to benefit from his years of complex deal making in an ever-evolving industry. His move to James Capital Advisors to help co-found the cannabis corporate real estate team with excellent new tools and partners should further the depth and breadth of the advisory that he seeks to provide capable operators. And Peter, welcome to the show today, man.
Thank you. Glad to be here. You make me sound so cool. I appreciate the help.
Oh, definitely. And I got to say, I've never heard cannabis and corporate in the same sentence. So
No, it is a strange new world. But as we'll get to, it's actually happened very fast, and it's happening more and more all the time. And for the most part, it's a very good thing. The heart and soul of the cannabis industry is about bringing people together, helping people. But there's some really great brands out there doing it in a very exciting way, and we're proud to help them.
Yeah, and it's funny because I'm from Illinois originally, the Chicago suburbs, but when I moved out to California, obviously it's much different out here. But now even in Illinois, and I know in your bio across 9 states, I didn't even know there was that many today that were operating like this. So I'm very interested to kind of jump in and see what we can chat about.
Yeah, I've actually done a deal in Illinois.
Really? Okay.
Their process was sort of, I didn't get too close to why it all went wrong, but their process got held up quite a bit. But I was working on a craft grow in a place called Bellevue, Illinois.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so that was a pretty cool phase for me. It was a pretty simple ordinance actually for the most part up front. They did a decent job.
That's interesting. I know the one in my hometown. My friends tell me there's lines out the door. I should say the dispensary in my hometown. They say there's lines out the door. So,
Oh yeah.
so yeah. Well, anyway, I know we've got a lot to talk about, so we should just jump in here. First topic. Why don't you bring us up to speed on when did you get started specializing in real estate and cannabis in particular?
Yeah, so I became a broker and got into the business kind of shortly before legalization happened. It was sort of early 2016. I broke in and I was working under a couple of senior industrial brokers. And just through sort of word of mouth and combing the streets and doing traditional brokerage business, I met this woman named Ann. And Ann had a property in the city of Port Hueneme that she wanted to sell. And it was an old dental office that she'd sort of been using as a personal storage and craft place and been in her family for 30, 40, 50 years. And I took the listing and I didn't think anything of it. It was just going to be a sort of an owner user, an investor sale in a very small town in California. And then out of the blue, in about 30 days of me having this listing, I was getting 10 calls a day on this dumpy little building. And most of it was cannabis operators or it was investors. And come to find out, of course, shortly thereafter that the city of Port Hueneme was on the back of Prop 64 going legal. And this was November 2016. Okay. Port Hueneme was going to be one of the first cities in the state of California that was going to allow the use. And so everybody who's anybody wanted to be one of the first movers and get in. And even though Port Hueneme is not a very big place, it was going to be one of the first chances to get your brand out there, to get operational and start making money. And I was getting calls from vice presidents of real estate, COOs, CEOs, guys whose pay grades are just way too high to be doing, individual real estate searches in Port Hueneme, California. No offense, Port Hueneme, I love you. But no brokers. And if it was a broker, it was sort of a residential person who was calling on behalf of their brother who wanted to start a cannabis business. There was no, I wasn't hearing from CBRE. I wasn't hearing from JLL. I wasn't hearing from the guys I traditionally would work with or talk to in the commercial real estate industry. So what I realized is that because the use was still federally illegal, a lot of these bigger firms, especially the publicly traded ones, would not allow their brokers to work on the use. And of course, it had been completely illegal even in the state of California prior to, a couple of weeks ago at this point. So there hadn't been any specific industry coverage by, the top industrial and retail guys in the nation on this thing. It was just open ocean. And as a new guy with a appetite for a lot of risk and banging his head against the wall, I thought, shoot, this is a chance for me to go out and sort of capture a lot of market share very early and really get my name out there. And I'm not nearly going to have the level of experience or broker that a typical young guy would have to compete with. I mean, I'm not beating or having to fight some 35-year industry veteran who's been knows everybody who's anybody and helped write the ordinance. It's kind of me and a bunch of people from Keller Williams, and I like those odds, especially with the backing of a traditional a commercial real estate firm. So I started farming the industry, taking all of these leads, offering to do searches, asking them where else they cared about in the state, and really committing myself to learning as much as I could about the use, about the plant, about the real estate. And it turned into a good decision.
Wow, that's a really cool first story. It sounds like it more or less accidentally found you, but
A million percent. Million percent. I was not a big user of the product before that. It wasn't something I had been following and was really excited to get into. It really was just right time, right place.
that's really interesting. That's really interesting because I know a lot of guys, they're starting in multifamily or they're starting in retail, and that's their choice. So it's interesting how it came to be like that. I'm sure a lot of people have a similar story that are in this this space. Now, it sounds, I guess, a question I'd ask there then, to develop an expertise in the space,
Mm-hmm.
was it more or less, we're the maps on the wall, we're going to just start writing the rules kind of thing? Is that how it kind of came to be from there?
Did a lot of reading,
Okay.
and a lot of traveling too, trying to go to as many trade shows, conventions, organizational events as I possibly could, because I understood very quickly that there is a culture in the cannabis industry that's very loyal, that's not very trusting to new people, and that respects people who actually know what the heck they're talking about. And so, regardless of how, I'm really a commercial real estate broker. My job is only to find you buildings.
Hmm.
I needed to know as much as I could about what people in the industry cared about. So I started going to things like MJ BizCon, which is an incredible cultural experience and has changed so much in just the last 4 years since I've been going. NCIA events, local talks by operators, growers, all that kind of stuff, and just trying to consume information, understand the plant, understand its life cycle, understand some of the concerns that retail guys have. What makes a brand successful? What makes it hot? And then, as far as the real estate component goes, it really is, you got to deep dive into the ordinances. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But the rules for how and where these guys can operate change dramatically from one city to the next. You could have two cities right next to each other, and they both run it differently. So you've got to dive in. You've got to understand the ordinances, understand sensitive use setbacks, all that kind of stuff, and how that affects my job. Because the worst thing I could ever do is not do my diligence on locating a property, cost a client of mine money for something that they can't even get licensed, and may not even find that out until several months in. So it's the component of understanding the real estate legal aspects, the zonings, as well as understanding the use and how those two things complement to find the right building.
A lot of reading, it sounds like, though, from
Oh
what
man,
I can hear. Yeah.
oh man, especially when you start getting into other states. That's one of the things that I've been proud to say has differentiated me, is I'm willing to invest the time and effort to actually read the Florida ordinance, which is entirely different than the California ordinance, or the Ohio, Illinois, a couple of the other places I've been working on. They all play it very, very differently. And so it takes time, it takes effort, but I found it essential for me being able to provide the kind of service I want to provide.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Well, let's keep on moving here. Up until 2016, with the passage of Prop 64 in California, real estate in the cannabis industry probably looked a bit different. Can you dive into kind of what that was like? Till today.
Yeah. So I was really involved in transitioning guys. In the early days, it was
Okay.
transitioning what had been illegal facilities, places that should not have been what they were, offloading those on behalf of guys that were either exiting the industry because they didn't want to participate in all the new regulations, or were trying to sort of clean up their portfolios and get legal, get
Okay.
compliant.
So even if they were doing something that was illegal, it wasn't as simple as just now it's legal kind of thing.
No, definitely
Okay.
not. Definitely
Okay.
not. There were programs in most places that enabled a gray market, we'll call it, facility to register and to transition. And another, it's sort of an extension of what has been called social equity in this format, in this industry, which is sort of righting the wrongs of the prosecution of this use and its operators and users for so long. It's been over policed, it's been misunderstood, it's been honestly lied about at a lot of levels
Hmm.
of government. So there's been an effort to sort of make amends. So there was ways to actually benefit from having been in the business previously, but that wasn't the case consistently across jurisdictions. It would change from city to city or county to county.
That's crazy because I've read a lot about that now. Everyone's reading about it, right? Like San
Mhm.
Francisco, I read something that they're um, trying to, any crimes are going to be not anymore, which is great if that's the case.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you start, and that was one of the things that I really started to personally connect with as I
Hmm.
investigated the industry, was just the frustration over something that can provide so much good to people being treated, like a violent crime in some
Yeah.
place. This guy wasn't really hurting anybody. In fact, he was probably helping people with their glaucoma more than anything else. Is in
Hmm.
jail serving large amounts of prison time for nothing. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so it's been a beautiful thing. It's not always been handled the right way. I think a lot of sort of well-intentioned programs have just sort of led to a little bit of exploitation. Wealthy individuals coming and having sort of this straw man social equity
Hmm.
applicant that they're backing up or propping up, who's not really going to participate in the business. But that's another issue. The spirit is there. It's meant to help people that have been negatively affected, and that's a great thing.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%, man. So I know you kicked us off kind of with the story. Any other stories, like maybe from the early days when it
Man.
was kind of this black market versus medical market
Yeah.
going on?
Yeah, well, if it was, there was kind of two worlds that I had to deal with there. One was the building growing marijuana,
Okay.
and then the other world was, is it currently growing marijuana?
So was
Uh,
it and is it today?
yeah,
That
correct. Well, meaning, like, let's say that's January or February of
Mhm.
2017, and I've got a listing for a 5,000 square foot industrial building in the San Fernando Valley. It is actively being used as a marijuana cultivation facility, meaning there are plants in that building right now, large amounts of them. How do you explain that to somebody who you're touring through the building prior to them showing up? There were circumstances where I had to advise other brokers, hey, look, this is part of the medical marijuana program where, they were supplying pre-ICO medicinal dispensaries. So just don't be alarmed. There's, 200 plants actively growing in this building. I don't want you to, freak out and think you're walking in on something suspicious. We're good. And then sometimes I would forget to have that conversation, and you just see people's eyes open as they were walking in, especially if they weren't intending to use it as a cannabis building. They were
Right.
just, if they say it was a construction equipment guy who just wanted a 5,000 square foot building in the valley, he had no idea what he was stepping into. So there were a lot of cases of that. The other one that was in the early days happened a lot, and it got kind of scary, was you would have actual criminals, thieves, who would scout the
Mm,
building on a tour. They would say they were
right.
interested in potentially leasing or buying it, and they would come and they would do a tour with me. And really, all they were doing was clocking the security cameras and the layout of the building. And then they would come back a day or two later at 2 o'clock in the morning with a buzz saw, cut the roll up door open, break in and steal all the plants. Um, And there's not a lot that you can necessarily do to protect yourself from that. If you're trying to sell the building and there's still crop in there, you can't sell a building without letting the person actually see the thing.
Right.
In most cases anyway.
Wow.
So there were, times where, and then kind of looking back, I obviously wasn't there when they broke in, but looking back, I'm like, wow, I was 2-3 feet away from a violent criminal for about an hour of my time yesterday. Never would have had any clue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's scary because I
Yeah.
bet that happened a lot because then,
Oh,
is the owner of the building, or, I mean, again, I guess go on a lot of tangents here, but is that, insurable? Is that, do you call?
that's a very good question. Back then, not really. I mean, if
Okay.
the use kind of, a lot of insurance carriers, because they're federally backed, also won't cover cannabis property. There's a whole industry
Wow.
now of cannabis property insurance with very specialized carriers that do it. But back then, those guys hadn't really come up yet. Those guys hadn't really, been a thing. No one had thought to focus on that. So usually the policy was not going to cover it, and that led to a lot of heartache for a lot of people.
I can imagine. Was it primarily retail and industrial? I mean, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking you've got industrial for the grow and then retail for the dispensary. Is that, or are they a lot of time in the same building too, even?
Especially in the early days. The licensing is this is one of the ways that cities can be very, very different with how they license. You'll get some cities that will not allow even dispensaries to be in retail zones. So
Okay.
put it all in industrial. Well, that's tough if you're a retail operator, because I don't need a 10,000 square foot industrial building to run a dispensary. And I don't, my business model is I don't grow or manufacture product. I just sell it to the public. So some of these smaller towns, if you wanted to get involved, you had to go find a small-ish industrial building that maybe had a retail facade, had been like
Okay.
a flooring showroom or something like that, and hopefully try and find those. But everybody's looking for those. So they disappeared very fast. They got very expensive. But yeah, for the most part, it was industrial for the manufacturing, the distribution, and the cultivation of the product, and then it was industrial or potentially retail for dispensaries. You'd have the odd office building deal. Lab testing facilities can go into, say, medical office space. I've never personally done many of those deals, just not as many of those operators. But yeah, you've got it right.
No, that's, yeah. I'm just trying to think of, you. I used to live down in Orange County, and it was a lot more funky down there, I think, than it was in LA, even
Yeah.
because, like you said, office and just not on your main retail areas, because that's not what the city probably wants, is to have
Yeah.
it on Main and Main right there.
Well, like Costa Mesa, for example, Measure
Mm-hmm.
X, they had down there. They put it in one pocket, right, next to a freeway. Initially, they're expanding it now, but it was all right in this one little industrial corridor. And so that was a bloodbath in there. It was like jumping into a pool of piranhas trying to find real estate. Everybody was looking. Everybody was bidding. Deals you thought you had, in bed, guys would sweep out underneath you at the last minute by offering double what you were going to pay. That got kind of hairy.
Okay.
Um, now just to for kind of context on how much the industry has grown and how much investment there's been, now you're seeing these and have been for several years, big ag deals, a lot of agricultural greenhouse deals going on as sort of bigger operators have been investing at scale, and creating the stuff you can grow outside is very, very different than the stuff you can grow in a hermetically sealed industrial building. So it's a slightly different business model, but you're seeing 40-acre, million square foot greenhouse deals. I mean, there's some bigger
Wow, that's big.
agricultural stuff. Yeah, there's some bigger agricultural stuff been going on for several years now.
Okay. I wasn't aware of that. What are some of the biggest changes since California and any other state you've operated in legalized recreational cannabis and set up an industry? What are some of the bigger things that you've noticed? Is like you mentioned pricing, right? Or like the someone coming in and doubling an offer
Oh
and
yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah.
Um,
The pricing thing was insane. I mean, it was absolutely out of control at first. Um, Places like Long Beach, some of the desert cities, Adelanto out here, you were seeing stuff trade for 3 times market value on purchases. I mean, buildings that were worth maybe 150 bucks a foot going for $400 a foot.
like if you had the industrial or whatever it would have been, take the cannabis out, that's what
Oh
it
yeah.
would go for. But because it's, yeah,
Yep.
wow,
Bingo.
okay,
And because everybody wanted to be a first mover, which has
mm,
value 100%, but stuff was getting bid up through the roof. And lease rates were similar. I mean, you were seeing $3 a foot on large industrial, 30,000, 40,000 square foot, facilities leasing for $3 a foot, triple net. just extortionary rates. And there was, some argument if you're representing a landlord, it is an opportunity. You can't do it just anywhere. So there is a premium for sure on the facility and the ability to operate there. So you were seeing a lot of that. That has definitely come down. It's still inflated, and it should be, because there is additional cost to the landlord to have the use in there. There is additional value created by the zoning and the potential revenue of the business in the case of a sale.
Mm-hmm.
But it's much more rational now, and I have to thank some of the bigger credit operators in the space for just sort of not putting up with inflated premiums as much as they used to. Let's have an honest conversation about what I can make and
Mm-hmm.
how much it's actually going to cost me to get this building compliant versus, in a perfect world, what sort of a golden parachute are you getting on this asset? So that's come down. The other one, which has really been pleasant for me, is general attitude towards the use. When I was first calling back in the day on buildings and saying, "Hey, I have a cannabis operator who would like to lease your building,"
Mm-hmm.
oh man, I got hung up on. I got cussed out. I had people quote the Bible at me.
Wow.
It
Okay.
was not well received. A lot of cases back then, people didn't even know their city was allowing it. It was news to. I was the first person telling them about this.
So you're educating on both ends. Like
Oh,
you're trying to
100%.
learn for yourself, but then you're making a phone call and it's like you didn't know, maybe we should have an honest conversation about this too, what you can do.
100%.
Wow.
And so, I'm putting on my best nice guy voice, and I'm being, real kind of sweet and just courteous and minding my P's and Q's, and trying to make, because I know what they think cannabis looks and feels like and what the operators are. So I'm immediately on PR mode, trying to control their expectations and their responses. Um, and I'm educating and I'm walking them through it. I'll come out and I'll meet them and I'll sit down and talk to them about it. Hey, here's the truth. Here's what's an issue. That's just absolutely not true. Here's the ordinance that
Mm-hmm.
says, from the city of Palm Desert, that says that this is allowed. And really, kind of holding hands, getting through there. Now I get calls from institutional landlords that own millions of square feet of real estate, from private equity companies representing high net worth individuals and their money, all different kinds of very reputable, very credible people, renowned single tenant retail developers. Hey, if you see an opportunity for us to get involved, either providing capital or leasing out some of these properties we have here and there, let us know. We'd love to at least have the conversation. And just in 3.5, 4 years, that shift has been unbelievable and very convenient for a guy like me who's trying to. If I don't have to talk everybody into every ounce of the deal, it's a lot less stressful.
That brings up another interesting thing I just thought about too. Were these all cash deals at first 3-4 years ago, and has that switched a lot now and made the journey easier?
So I actually just wrote an article on this for a publication called Cannabis Business Executive, where I was talking about the evolution of financing in this space. I don't know when that'll come out, but next couple of months or whatever. And yes, absolutely, 100%. Any FDIC insured institution still to this day cannot lend on cannabis.
Oh, still to this day.
Still right now, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Safe Banking Act is
Mm-hmm.
sort of paving the way for that to actually go through. And now we're actually talking about broad spectrum legalization some point in the next couple of years.
What was the banking act called? You said
It's called the Safe Banking Act,
Okay.
SAFE. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's sort of past one level of approvals or another, and then been sent back for adjustment and edit. But when that goes through, you'll be able to see at some point you'll see Wells Fargo and guys like that doing those
Mm-hmm.
loans. But for right now, still can't do it. So in the early days, you were looking at hard money for the most part, private
Mm-hmm.
money.
Okay.
Um, and it was at extortionary interest rates. I mean, unbelievable interest rates, stuff north of 12, 13, 14, 15%.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and short amortization schedules, big balloon payments.
So
Um,
you're getting on every aspect of the spectrum. First, the landlord's charging you more to lease out the space or
oh
buy the
yeah,
space, and then if you can't go all cash,
oh yeah,
it.
oh yeah. And on top of that, the licensing process and build out. The build out's expensive on some of these grow facilities. You have to create an environmentally controlled, hermetically sealed. I've said that twice now, but box within an existing industrial building. You've got heavy HVAC requirements. You've got expensive extraction equipment, security upgrades in almost every version of the use. There's big security upgrade investment. And so it starts to get very, very pricey very, very fast. And when you're having to get a loan to buy a building, right? The early valuations too, you would have, a 12% interest rate. Try getting 50% even loan to value back then. Probably not going to happen because
Wow.
the private individual, and then you started to see credit unions coming online as being a good source of capital for this use. Credit unions that could lend. They're not going to lend at loan to value north of 30%, maybe 40. So you've got a low loan to value that you can get access to at a high interest rate on a short amortization schedule, and the cost of the building is probably at double what it should be. So the underwriter who's taking a look at that loan looks at what the actual cost of the building is. They're not lending on a cannabis premium. They're lending at what they believe the value of the asset is. So you're getting 20, 30, 40% of that high interest. It was almost
Nothing pencils out, right? It's like,
oh man. Oh man, almost pointless. You saw a lot of the big Canadian guys were spending tons of cash. The Canadian guys were a lot of the very aggressive first movers because they had the access to the capital. So Canopy, Aurora, Suniva, you started seeing a lot of these guys from up there who could get, because of the legalization in Canada, could get large sums to go out and acquire real estate. They were doing all cash deals. And some of the better funded California-based groups, some of the bigger brands that you kind of already know and love, they were able to do cash deals and acquire real estate. Or individuals companies that were backed by, maybe they had like one really wealthy board member or founder who was a ton of money, usually a celebrity of some kind.
Right.
So there were cash deals that were going on, but most people were kind of either leasing or they were sort of stuck.
That's crazy. That's wild to think. I mean, and it still probably is. Like you said, it's not federally yet. So
100%. I mean, there's more credit unions that are willing to do it, and there's more money coming into the space, more private investors looking to give money to somebody. But it's still not great. It's now, you're seeing retail rates, healthy traditional retail lenders in the space that are lending on cannabis 8.75% interest on retail. Industrial get 9.25% interest.
wow. Okay.
You'll get,
And that's good.
oh yeah, considering, I mean, down 5%
Yeah.
in 2 years, that's pretty great. And then you'll have actually 25-year now. You'll see longer amortizations. It's usually due in 5 or 10, but it's amortized over 25 years.
Wow. Okay. Okay. And I wanted to switch topics here, but I'm just curious too, your thoughts. Like, do you see then, a lot of small mom and pops in the space, or do you think everyone's going to get pushed out by, the all cash people, just because if you want to play, you got to pay to play, right?
Mm. And this is a big topic of sort of casual conversation in the industry. Is the heart and soul of what cannabis was meant to be going to be lost as federal legalization happens?
Right.
You start seeing Anheuser-Busch.
Right. Marlboro coming in here. Probably.
Oh,
I'm just making an
Philip
assumption.
Morris,
But
Sarah Reynolds,
yeah.
absolutely. Constellation Brands. You're going to see big money coming in. And they'll be offering to write checks to, mom and pops all over the place. And for some of them, it'll be great. I'm happy for those people that actually got through all this adversity we're talking about, got to a point where they can have a lucrative exit for their business. God bless them. That's a dream, and good for them. But those people, those mom and pops, the people from the community, helping the community, that have got a very deep personal connection with the plant and kind of the journey it took them on in their life, they're a big part of the charm and sort of the soul of the industry. And as it becomes more corporate, do we lose that? And it's absolutely possible. I think the nature of the licensing component and the fact that you've got a lot of cities, most cities will only put so many dispensaries in their towns, and they'll have things like, you can only have one license in this community, and it doesn't matter who you are, you can't have every dispensary in town. There's some protections and inherent industry protections, but it's gonna look a lot more like the tobacco and alcohol world that we know today, where you're gonna have the brands that are widely available at most stores. Some of those guys are actually starting to already stand out. You've got Stizzies and Roves and Selects and Pacific Stones, and got well-known brands in the industry. And then Cookies is a retail brand, great example of something who's gotten out and really captured, market share in a big way and developed brand loyalty. You'll see that happen, but you'll still have, take the beer industry. How popular are microbreweries out here?
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
huge.
right? Craft brew, specialty distillers creating, new out. You're going to have that still, and I hope that does stay because it leads to great product innovation, cool customer experiences, getting to try new things. But it's going to look. There's going to be a lot of consolidation in the next 5 to 10 years, no doubt about it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, man. That's it happens in every industry for the most part too, right? I feel like it just this might take this might go quicker because of how much money's involved. I feel like.
You're not wrong. I think got good instincts in that regard.
So, talking about the principles of investing or leasing in the cannabis space, I know you just mentioned licensing.
Mhm.
I'm not too familiar with kind of how this stuff works, but I know like I was on a trip to Portland. This is a while ago, a couple of years ago now, and I remember someone telling me how up in Oregon you can they're like Starbucks, they're everywhere, whereas down here I think it's different than that. So is that a fair assessment or
So
it?
Oregon, yeah, Oregon was a particularly interesting example. They more or less over licensed the grows. There
That's what
was
someone was
actually,
telling me. Yeah.
yeah, there was too much flour getting made and not enough
Mhm.
retail outlets. So while Portland had quite a bit, that was sort of it. You know what I mean? It wasn't, they don't have big major metro centers every
Right.
10, 15 miles up there. They've got a couple of big cities. So if you didn't have relationships to get on shelf space, oh man, you want to talk about how you hear Walmart gets very competitive trying to get shelf space in Walmart. Cannabis industry is just as bad. Uh,
Really? Okay.
oh yeah, because the places are small. Those shelves are worth a lot of money, and so people will fight tooth and nail and work preferential relationships and all that just to get on people's shelves. Super super normal. Um,
I
and
didn't even think about that. That's
oh
wild. That's a whole other. I mean, I feel like we should do a 2.0 on this on
yeah.
educating Matt on how to get in
You
in the
probably want to
retail.
interview, yeah, you probably want to interview a distributor for that one, but it's real. And so distributor relationships and brand relationships, those guys, the business development guys that are out literally driving up and down the state, knocking on doors and making introductions and selling, they're crucial, absolutely crucial to success. Very relationship driven business as a whole. But so yeah, so all these growers growing this plant up in Oregon were having difficulty actually getting it sold to the public, and so you had kind of lower price per pound, so the growers weren't making as much money. Um, Down here, it depends on where you go. I mean, there's been hundreds of dispensaries in LA for a really long time, but there's also sort of been, is this one legal? Is that one not
Yeah.
legal? How do I know? And what does that mean? Um, for reference, 85% ish of the product that was sold prior to legalization in California, 85% would be deemed illegal by today's standards. That's for stuff like pesticides, mold, heavy metals.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
so while you might be saving money buying from the black market, you have no guarantee that what you're putting into your body is healthy. So just throwing that out there as sort of an infomercial for buying from legal dispensaries. Um, so you do see it much more in certain places than others. It is growing. There still are not enough dispensaries licensed, in my opinion, and there's going to be significantly more. It's created a bit of a bottleneck in the industry, but that's changing. That's growing. But we need to get access to medicine, access to care to these people. Never mind the recreational component; it's wonderful. But as we start to see more stores open up, I think you're going to start seeing sales numbers increase. And I really believe that we don't know what the roof of the total sales volume in this industry even remotely looks like. Another example, because it's not federally legal, these guys can't market. You can't put a
Mm,
commercial on the Super Bowl
right. I didn't think about that.
for Rincon Ranch. You're not allowed to. Cookies can't advertise. On a primetime news show. They're not allowed to yet. They can't make claims. Um, what does the world look like when they can? And they can start getting education out there and start talking to people about what their products actually can do for you. And you know, that's always going to be a little regulated. There's a lot of people that are concerned. I don't want my kids seeing marketing for marijuana. I can't understand that. But what happens when they can all of a sudden broadly market, when they can provide more information to the general consumer who's not a cannabis user? Like for me, I hardly used the stuff prior to really getting into the industry and learning more and more about it. And now it's a somewhat regular part of my week. I mean, I'm not lighting up first thing in the morning, but I enjoy products to help with the stress, with sleep,
Oh yeah.
all kinds of stuff. And it's just because I learned about it. I now know what that stuff is and what the risks actually are and are not. So
Yeah.
that'll start to really speed up as time goes on.
Well, it's a good point you bring up too, because it's like you look at alcohol ads, and it's like,
Mm,
everyone's having fun getting drunk, but no one's educated on what that hangover feels like the first few times,
mm,
and
mhm.
if you look at things as a medicine versus, I agree with you on that. Like once education and things like that gets pushed out there, I think it'll be way better,
Oh yeah,
for the industry, but just for, as a whole, for people being able to
oh
have
yeah,
access to that stuff.
absolutely.
Um, I mean, and it's funny in talking about the licensing, like in timelines and stuff. I mean, I'm just thinking, there's a liquor store on every corner, if not two or three in some areas. So is that what do you see it like that, kind of like long term?
Not that prevalent, I don't think. You're going to see CBD stuff everywhere. I mean, it's already sold in places like Rite Aid. I think 24 Hour
Yeah,
Fitness actually sells CBD stuff.
really. Okay.
Yeah. So you're going to see CBD because it's just it's a different chemical. It's a different, a different thing. But no, I think there is a need to going into a good cannabis dispensary, a well-run cannabis dispensary, is as much an education as it is a shopping experience. The bud tenders, the people that work in these stores, and the good ones are very well educated, and they can actually teach you a lot about which ones are good for you and which ones are not. And there's a certain component of that biochemistry in each of us that reacts differently to one thing versus now. You and I could have the same thing and have totally different experiences. And so there's a lot of the question and answer time and learning and education that I think should be a part of everybody's buying experience. But so that's why I don't ever think it should. I mean, people are going to kill me probably when they see that I said this, but I don't ever know that it should just be like walk into a 7-Eleven and grab pre rolls off of a shelf. There should be a component of, hey, this can impact your body, this can impact your mind. There are certain things you shouldn't do while you're on this. Let's have educated people, responsible people, being the ones that guide you through that process, or recommend products. So I hope there is a component. There's too much regulation in it now, for sure, in my opinion. But I think there still always should be some.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we hear stories all the time. If you don't know if you take an edible, man, and you don't know what's in there, oof, you
Yeah,
better, a couple of days maybe. So
that's less the case for sure. That's less the case now than it was before. That's the
yeah.
black market thing I was telling you about. Like
Hmm.
it says, yeah, this is a weed brownie. Well, how much THC is in it? Eat it. And all of a sudden your friend disappears for 10 hours. So that's those days are less likely to happen now, especially if you learn what about dosing and THC to CBD and how smoking it is different than eating it. So this is the kind of education I'm talking about. That
Yeah, I agree,
shouldn't
man.
that
For
shouldn't happen
Yeah.
near. I mean, we all know that guy, but that shouldn't happen as much as it used to.
Well, it's like one of Joe Rogan's most recent comedy skits. He's like asking the guy, how much should I take? He's like, take a leg. He's talking about gummy bears. He's like, why are you selling whole bears, man? If I'm only supposed to take the leg. So it's like,
Yeah, that's that's great advice actually, because I've definitely seen those single gummy ones, and it's almost like a radioactive symbol on
yeah,
it. Hey, just a warning. This gummy bear will fight you, and there's people. Why is this necessary then? Why do I need one this big? Um, yeah, it's totally normal. I mean, I remember back the funniest story I've got from those days. Like I said, I was never a big participant, but I had, of course, had friends. I live in California, and it's been
hmm
legal in dispensaries medicinally for a while. I had one friend who took, it was like a brownie with sprinkles on it, the most innocuous looking thing you've ever seen, like really non-threatening. If you'd seen it at a kid's birthday party, wouldn't have batted an eyelash. Well, he spent, I think, 6 hours standing in front of his fridge, watching the world end, and then
I
and
believe it.
and then finally came back to the party. I mean, it's those that's dangerous, and that's what
Hmm.
legalization has really done is hopefully take a lot of those experiences sort of out of the cannabis world.
Absolutely, man. Well, just to get back on track a little bit, just on the licensing side of things,
Sure.
right? Because one thing I'm curious about, like, how long does it actually take for an operator to get a license? And that could be, retail versus process versus grow, or like,
Yeah.
I'm sure are they all different, or
Yeah, great
are,
question.
yeah,
And there is a lot of variation, and that is one of the things that I would consider essential for anybody calling himself a cannabis expert in real estate
yeah,
is knowing those time frames. And it's not laid out in most ordinances. They're not going to promise you 90 days for this and 60 days for that. They're not going to do that. especially as the newer jurisdictions are opening. It's maybe their first time going through this process, and they think they've got a lot of liability if they do it wrong or if they
Yeah.
license the wrong person. So they're going to take their time and they're going to do it, try and do it as best they can to the best of their ability.
So you're getting full background checks and everything, like the
Oh
whole.
man,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's so there's a lot of different versions of licensing, but the most common one you'll see will be a two-phase program where you'll have to get the facility licensed, zoning compliance, security, all of that. Zoning verification letters will be issued after that part of the process, or they'll issue a CUP in like say Sacramento. They'll issue a CUP on the facility. Yes, this is where it should be. It looks like it should look. It's safe. It's compliant. Then the operator's got to go get licensed, and that's the background checks, the live scans, the they can dive into your books and do you have the capital to make this work, and here are your deposits to the city. We're going to do interviews. Who are the people on staff? These have all got to be registered. Nobody else can come into the facility unless they're a guest and they've signed a book. And so it's usually two-step. Sometimes it can be one, and timeframes are all over the place.
Okay.
And so for like me, as I'm negotiating a purchase and sale agreement or a lease that may be compliant on licensing, I'm going to do that deep dive to make sure expectations are managed for both the landlord, the seller, or the tenant buyer, so that we know how much money is being asked up front before they can even open the door to the public or turn on a single light. We really need to know what is your exposure prior to operations. And the landlord needs to know that, because while the guy may have a building and he really wants to sell it, he's been wanting to sell it for a while, all of a sudden it's cannabis compliant somehow. I want a 90-day due diligence and an escrow. And I want a 250% premium on the value of the real estate. Well,
Everything goes up now, right? It's like,
oh man.
yeah.
Well, but why am I as an operator, as a buyer, I'm going to pay you a 250% cannabis premium and you're going to make me close before I even know if I can get a license there?
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean? It's if you want that premium, I get it. Let's
Give me
negotiate what
time.
that looks like, but give me the time to actually know if I can use the facility. That doesn't always happen. Massive deposits or rents prior to operations. They're asking $8 a foot, and we need you to start paying rent 90 days after we sign the lease. Well, in the case of LA, there's people who've been waiting licenses for years.
Wow.
Literally,
oh, really? Okay.
literally years, and there's been a lot of defaults, people falling out, giving up because they've run out of cash. They just don't have the money to be able to float that long, and nobody knew. The landlords didn't know, the operators didn't know, their attorneys didn't know, but it is what it is. So you got to build contingencies. You've got to build deposit releases. You've got to build protections for both the landlord, who deserves to get compensated for their time, their commitment, but as well as the operator who's footing the bill for something they may not control at all.
That's wild to think about. Like, the due diligence on this is tenfold, it sounds like, to buying a triple net deal or something like that.
It is a lot more complicated. It really is. And leasing has a lot more risk involved. But that is why I believe that calling myself a cannabis real estate, me and the other members of the team here, us calling ourselves cannabis experts, that actually comes with a book of credibility on having done these deals and seen this pain and helping these people mitigate these risks as they enter these transactions. It's a beautiful opportunity for people that own property and for entrepreneurs. But I mean, there's sad stories out there about people who are 18 months, 2 years in, are now bankrupt, and it never worked out. And it could have been avoided if the real estate transaction had been managed a little bit better.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I think you just said something about leasing more not more risky than sale. Is that like?
Yeah.
Do you go into every transaction with like, we might do this, we might do that? Just depends on how the dice roll on doing the due diligence and stuff like that, or?
You mean doing a lease versus a sale?
Yeah, lease versus sale. Like, do you know going in like what that's going to look like, or?
Sure. So the managing an escrow is pretty black and white, right? Like we have we open escrow with a certain amount at a purchase price with a certain deposit and a certain length of due diligence, and we can structure a couple of extensions in there, really black and white.
Okay.
And those are clearly laid out in a purchase and sale agreement. There are extensions, and I know exactly how much money I have at risk at any given moment, right? So if theoretically, if I used every extension I have, I'm going to potentially have to spend $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 at most. I know that. Leasing's not the case. Leasing, it's, okay, I had 6 months to go get my license before my lease was non-contingent. There was 1 or 2 extensions in there. But if I take the risk, if I get to the end of whatever my period is that I had contingencies, and I choose to go non-contingent and commit to seeing this through because I believe I'm going to do. I don't know, but I believe. Well, you may have just committed to a 10-year lease. You
Oh, I
don't
see. And
with,
yeah,
with
that's
annual
crazy.
escalations involved, and you may not be operational until year 3. You just
Wow.
don't know, and that's a worst case scenario. It's
Right.
not as common as you might think, but that happens. I've run out, and the landlord's sitting there going, I have to start getting compensated. I live on this this rent.
Hmm.
This is how I pay for my lifestyle. I've got to start getting paid my rent, and the tenant's going, I can't pay you 2 times, 3 times, 4 times market. I can't even pay you market if I can't make any money. I've got my one source of funds, and it's depleting every single month. On top of everything else I'm having to pay for to try and pursue the license. And so that's where things start getting a little bit of risk, real risky is what's my potential capital outlay for this whole process? And if there's no set time frames, it gets a little scary.
And that brings up something that I'm just thinking about because in doing deals for you guys, then I mean, is it strictly California? And then when a client of yours you're already working with wants to venture out to Oregon,
Mm.
Illinois, something, is that when you start, learning about that what happens in those areas to do deals, or do
That's
you
a
guys focus on certain areas?
great question. So my partners have really been very LA focused.
Okay.
Me, the way I ended up going out of state was I started working initially with consulting firms, sort of third party seed to sale consultants that would guide wealthy individuals through getting into the industry, or would help existing brands scale. And so
Okay.
those people would take me from California because they liked working with me. They liked, the professionalism, and they liked the quality of my service. And they would say, "Hey, Florida is opening up. Is there any way you would consider working a requirement out there?" And I would go, "Okay, let me look at the ordinance and see, what are we looking at for time frame?" Some places, Massachusetts in particular, always stands out as a place I turned down working in, really, because the ordinance was so convoluted. Every little township got to pick its own rules, more or less, for a while. And there's no way I could do a thorough statewide search, reading having to call every city hall in the state of Mass. It
Wow.
was never going to work. Oh yeah,
Okay.
Florida wasn't a lot better, but it was better. And so yeah, so the operators have been the ones that have taken me to other states and said, we really would like to continue to work with you. Is there any way you could do it? And in most cases, there I find a very capable local partner from an experienced firm that'll work with me. Uh, I work as the compliance and sort of licensing specific to the real estate expert, and I manage the client. And then we leverage the relationships from those excellent local brokers that we source, that we interview, to actually, use their landlord relationships, to use their market knowledge to find great locations.
Nice. I mean, it sounds like a lot of fun too, though, because you're, if you want to go to another area, it's like, okay, cool. Now we can see what's going on here.
It is pretty cool. It is
Yeah.
pretty cool. And you start building all these great relationships, and it's different. And you get, I'm working with some guys in Georgia right now, and I hop on the phone, and they're all just chuckling in their thick Southern accents about, the fact that they're helping set up a devil lettuce, plantation. And you just you start laughing, and then, Nevada, Pennsylvania, New York is the big one that everybody's talking about today. It's just, you get a different experience. You get a different flavor, and it's been very cool. I've made some very good friends, and been able to help some very good people by doing it. And yeah, it's cool being able to get on a plane and fly to Philadelphia to look at the location as you sign the lease. Like that makes me feel cool.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's switch topics a little bit. I can't believe we've been going for this long already. Let's switch topics to common myths about the cannabis industry. And, one might be that we got high before the show, which we didn't do, but people might have thought that, you know what I mean? So, but just because it's about cannabis, everyone thinks that, are these people going to be able to pay rent? Is my building going to stink? Are my neighbors going to complain? Are we going to get robbed? I can only imagine how many of them there are,
Sure.
but yeah.
So the first question is the paying the rent. I get that a lot. Like, I don't
Is
want
it a
to.
sack of cash? Like, are we, going under the mattress and
There were times where that was the case. I've been the bag man once or twice, and that's stressful. Bringing a big cash deposit from one part of California to another, and
yeah.
that's I'm not a Brinks truck. I'm sitting there in my Toyota Camry or whatever it was I had when I first started. Doing a little better now, but yeah. So there were those days. Now, real sophisticated, that's actually a really good way to vet the sophistication and the quality of the operator you're interviewing for your space is do they have access to banking? There's no reason these days why sophisticated operators should not have access to banking.
Okay.
Whether it's through credit unions, some of these specialized cannabis financial institutions that have sprung up that'll handle digital direct deposit account management, sophisticated operators, good operators have access to a bank account that can pay rent. They should. Anybody who tells you otherwise, I would move on. Just
Okay.
I'm sure there are exceptions, but for me, in my experience, it's a sign. Security, typically, actually, the security that goes up, it improves. You're less likely to have your facility broken into, if you at least to a cannabis user that gets licensed most of the time, because they have to have 24-hour security. So an armed guard is frequently there
24
a
hours.
lot. Oh yeah, because there's product. I mean, there's stuff people would steal there all hours of the
Right.
day. So a lot of jurisdictions will have requirements for an armed guard 24/7, heavy
Well, it's
security.
required by the city to do it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Some guys will do it just because they feel like it's the right thing to do. But
Makes sense. Yeah.
a lot of cases it's 24/7 armed guards.
Wow.
And then heavy security camera and microphone upgrades, which in a lot of cases these days actually will through software will link up directly to the police department. So the police,
That's cool.
for example, the police chief of Port Hueneme, we were talking about earlier, can sit in his office and pull up the cameras real time of every dispensary in the city of Port Hueneme. He can look into their store middle of the night, middle of the day, whenever, and see exactly what's going on.
I mean, that would make me feel really safe as a business owner.
Exactly, and you're not
Yeah.
usually the one paying for it because that's a tenant-specific improvement. So it's not the landlord, writing the check for that. So that one's not really a concern. Some of the big grows or some of the worst neighborhoods, they're potentially that could happen. But again, there's improved security to handle that. More often than not, you just negotiate the lease to make that the tenant's responsibility for any damages incurred in the event of. So the other thing, odor, get a lot of questions about odor. The first one, if it's a retail dispensary, it's not going to be an odor issue. They don't have open product at those stores. They all have to be sealed.
Okay.
In child-proof, containers most of the time, vials with twisty tops or sealed back. Yeah. There's no odor issue. The grows, there shouldn't be an odor issue. A lot of times to stay in compliance, these places have to install carbon filtration systems, negative pressure systems into the building, which keep all of that smell inside. And if they are having major odor issues, that's actually out of compliance in most cases with the ordinances. You will run into odors around farms, outdoor farms, which is why you've seen a lot of legal fighting up in Santa Barbara County. And why you're just not seeing big fields of marijuana all over the place is because that does create a pretty serious odor issue. But industrial buildings, there should not be an odor. There shouldn't be.
So the build out on this, I mean, it's pretty pricey for the tenant.
Oof. Yeah. It depends on the operator, and it depends on the state the building was in, but it can get to $100 a foot worth of TI improvements and stuff.
Wow. Okay.
It can get intense.
That's wild. That doesn't surprise me, though. It doesn't surprise me. Any trends you think that are coming in the space, like or for me personally, I like the CBD blend. It makes it easier, and I'm
you talking about with the products?
Well, anything, like leasing activity, buying space, products. Like, what has become more popular? Financing, even, like, is that will I be able to use my American Express credit card at the dispensary ever, and stuff like that? At
some point, yeah. The expectation is that first 6 months after the Safe Banking Act goes through or it's federally legalized, you're not going to see the big boys jump right in because they manage people's money. They got to be safe. But you'll see some very aggressive early moves. The thought is from guys like CMBS lenders,
really,
who have a very open mandate in terms of what they can get financed, what they can approve. You'll probably see those guys doing some bigger deals. I would hint that I know for a fact there are some CMBS groups already looking at specific assets that they can do refis or sale leasebacks for.
And these are with the big companies, you're saying, like MedMan maybe and stuff.
Usually, but some of the big TrueLeaf, Curaleaf.
Okay, yeah.
Some of the bigger boys in the space, you'll see CMBS stuff. And so that's probably going to be something that'll get hot for a minute. And as far as products go, actually, one thing I'll say that I hope becomes a trend, because I think it's a really, really cool customer experience and a great way for people to interface with the use, is the consumption lounge, which is an on-site restaurant, cafe, or product using room, whatever, where people can actually go to a dispensary or go to a restaurant, order cannabis infused. There's one actually in West Hollywood already.
I went there. The
Yeah,
Lowell Farms.
yeah,
I've been
yeah.
there.
And it's
It's
it's very
great.
stressful is figuring it out because actually dosing food and keeping the flavor is actually really hard. There's not a lot of people that know how to properly infuse cannabis into edibles or cooked food. It's tough. So there's been, that is something that a lot of people get very, very excited about, especially when you talk about like consumption lounges in places like Las Vegas,
Mm-hmm.
where you
You're
can
not
go.
driving anywhere. You're
Oh
walking,
man,
right? So,
shoot! And so you can go sit with your friends, buy some real quality stuff, go next door to this real cool, comfortable environment, and try the product, socialize, order whatever you want to do, and that I think is something that a lot of people are very excited about. So I would love to see some more of that going on, and that'll make for some fun real estate deals for me, obviously.
oh yeah.
And that I would say is a trend I hope I see and one that I'm looking forward to when it does eventually happen.
Yeah, that's funny 'cause I went to Amsterdam in like 2008, I want to say.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, I'm surprised it hasn't happened more so here yet,
Oh yeah.
like it is over there. Yeah, that'd be something I'd
That's
like to see too.
that's a perfect example. I mean, you have
Hmm.
people coming from all over Europe to go there and do that. That's how
Hmm.
big of an experience it is for people. I can very easily see stuff like that going on around here.
Yeah, time will tell, man. I can imagine. Hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah.
Um,
100%.
well, I know we've been going for a while, but we got to get into one topic that I'm very curious about. So, like, the best ways for agents, brokers to get into the space. Would you say, and I don't know where we're at on the bell curve. Like,
Sure.
are we is it too hard to get into it now, or
I would
is it
say
still early on?
if you're an agent or you're a broker, we're all full up. We're no longer accepting applications. We got it handled. We got the JCA team. That's all we need. No, I would say you just got to take your time. These users, these operators, there's big private equity money, sophisticated capital, and people who are used to working with high functioning commercial real estate teams that have been in the space and continue to get into the space. But I would say you need somebody that these deals get to be as much a private equity experience as they are a landlord tenant or a traditional commercial real estate transaction. You got to dive in. You got to understand the company.
Okay.
Who am I hitching this wagon to? Because it can be a great opportunity for you as a landlord, or as an agent. But if you don't understand who you're representing and the challenges they're going to face, you're going to struggle. You might get a couple of deals done. There are plenty of guys that have done cannabis deals, but there's not a lot of guys that specialize in the use. There's every other broker you'll meet will say, yeah, I did a cannabis deal once. No,
Yeah.
and it's that's great. I mean, awesome. I'm glad that it's widely accepted, but there's a different level of investiture and time and efforts and understanding what's going on that needs to be put in. It really is just a matter of getting out there and learning. You got to learn the industry. You got to meet people. Brokerage is brokerage to a certain extent. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the keys to success are not new. But there's just the additional investment of the specialized knowledge that you need for operating safely and guiding people appropriately through the industry.
And I mean, I didn't really, you opened my mind, man. I didn't realize like, the nuances of whether no matter what, whether you're the building owner or you're the business owner and you want to have someone like you guys that have done this many, many times and know what's going on versus a retail broker, not that, that just sells retail properties or,
Right.
I mean, I didn't even realize it was, I mean, I think that goes back to the due diligence probably, right? Even on your own education, like I need to be educated on this before I can help you out.
1,000,000%, 1,000,000%. And it's been incredibly rewarding. It's been very stressful. You see a lot of deals kind of, don't end up happening because it was a competitive licensing process. We spent all this time and effort and they didn't win a license. They were only giving out 10 in the city and there were 70 applicants.
Wow.
My guy didn't win. There's been a lot of that, but we've gone through all that over the last 4 or 5 years and we've learned sort of what to look for to be the guy that wins. To represent winning teams and winning locations and be honest, hey, Bill, I really don't think this part of town's going to get a license.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you have a deal with a traditional tenant who's going to give you a good lease, I would do that deal because I think you're an uphill battle at this spot for X, Y, or Z reasons. There's a lot of stuff that's come with, the cuts and bruises we've gotten figuring it out.
I can imagine. That's wild. that's got to be fun though, fun ride. And hey, if you do get stressed out, you got something that can help you out with it too. So that's
Oh,
good.
yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, the social gatherings are always a good time. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
I could
the
imagine.
parties are fun.
That's a fun closing dinner, I bet.
Of course, totally
You know,
above board.
yeah. Do you? I mean, other question too that I have, just because with Biden in office now, and everyone's saying
Mm.
it's going to be legalized across the country. I mean, would you say like what you've seen is Green Rush 1.0, and we're going to have 2.0 coming down the pipe? No pun intended. Really soon here.
There's definitely a lot of opportunity to be had. 100%.
Okay,
Um, as access to capital, and that's the big one. As access to capital becomes
that's a
more
big thing. You think once it's
huge, huge,
yeah,
huge. So you'll start seeing people being able to get debt or do refis, or you'll have more traditional real estate investors willing to buy property on behalf of the industry, which means a lot of those guys can either generate more cash to go invest
right,
in product innovation, in branding and marketing, in expanding their business. So we could see brands doing cool, unbelievable things with their products and with their brands that no one's ever seen before. And I'm excited about that because it's been a long time coming. Um, you'll also see very interesting dynamic shifts as because right now there's more or less like a great wall of California around California. You can't grow plant here and sell it in Vegas. You can't grow
oh,
a
I didn't
plant.
know that.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
no moving product across state lines. That's that's
Oh,
that's a big that's a big one. That's how the DEA shows up at your door in the middle of the night.
hmm.
Um, and you can't grow it in Colorado and send it here. But what happens when that changes? What happens when you start seeing real estate in Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee that's I mean half the price it is here in California.
Right.
Guys can go out and build 1 million square feet of greenhouse, grow stuff with lower real estate costs, potentially lower taxes, especially if it's a place like Florida, Tennessee, somewhere like that, and then ship quality product here. What
Wow.
does that
Okay.
what does that do to pricing?
Yeah.
If you don't have brand loyalty, if people aren't sticking with you because they love the quality they consistently get from you, are they going to buy from you anymore when they can get something comparable for half the price, for three
Hmm.
quarters of the price? How do we adjust? Do we continue to protect the industry? What do we do? So that's going to be an interesting dynamic. Um, I think to some extent, speaking specifically for California, there's a lot of wine that gets grown in places like Arkansas and South America and stuff like that, but people still pay a premium for California Pinot Noir.
Right.
Uh, I really, I
Absolutely.
really, I really believe our market out here, our agricultural roots and our heritage is, a bread basket or a fruits basket for the United States of America and for the world. I think that stays. I really think there's a premium on the California grown stuff. I really
I
feel
hope so,
that
man.
with
I
good
hope
reason.
so.
And frankly, we have some of the best operators out here, the
Yeah.
smartest guys that have been doing it the longest, that have really been leading the charge for the growth of the industry for long before legalization happened. So I believe we're going to be fine, but there's going to be some dynamic shifts. Definitely some dynamic shifts and and anytime you have changes like that, there's always opportunity.
Man, that's I have a lot more questions, but again, we'll have to wait. I know we're coming up on time here. Um, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. I think yeah, I think I hope that our audience will learn a lot just as much as I did, because man, I have a ton more questions though. But any final last words of advice for anyone, brokers, investors,
Sure.
people that are novices like myself that don't know much about this space, trying to enter the cannabis commercial real estate space? What would you say?
Yeah, 100%. My advice to anybody getting in the space or is currently in the space is just do your due diligence. It is
Hmm.
definitely a golden opportunity for a lot of people, but it's not a smooth path to get to that finish line. There's a lot of money involved. To a certain extent, there's a big pay to play component in the industry. You got to have the resources to be able to get the project done properly. So if you're planning a business or you're planning to get into the space or grow, spend a little extra money on some business forecasting, some accounting, and really understand the economics of what you're going to be dealing with as you move forward and how those might change. Be conservative in your expectations. Be prudent in yeah. We're going to make all this money. Well, how much and when? Take your time and really understand those dynamics, and then find experts. There's if it's like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And
Hmm.
because you've got a great idea doesn't mean somebody else didn't have it before you. There's people like me out there and Karina and Josh on my team here. We've seen a lot, we've done a lot, and we're happy to share that knowledge and become a part of your team and part of your success. And so I would say reach out, look for the experts. There are great cannabis attorneys out there, build out specialists, and interior design specialists and licensing pros, all kinds of experts in this industry. Take your time, go find those people. Call me when you need real estate, and we're happy to help and be a part of this ever growing industry for you.
That's awesome, man. Well, last thing, where can people find you online, or where can we get in touch with you?
Yeah,
Because I
so
definitely think we should get your info out there too.
100%. So, obviously, I work at James Capital Advisors here on Wilshire Boulevard in beautiful Los Angeles. You can
Mhm.
always reach me at JCA. You've got my Instagram, which I believe is at Peter Padden. I'm pretty sure. And then you've got at James Capital Advisors. You can reach out on the company Instagram. They'll get in touch. You can find me on LinkedIn. Peter
Okay.
Padden. I'm a pretty digitally savvy individual. I am at the north end of the millennial generation, but I am still technically a millennial. So usually
Me too,
online
man.
is
I'm
yeah. And
trying
then
to figure
and then
that online stuff.
Peter.Padden at jamescapitaladvisors.com.
Perfect.
That's probably the most direct and easy way.
That's the easiest for sure. Awesome. Well, this is a lot of fun. Thanks so much for joining us today, Peter. Thanks everybody for joining us and sharing, and obviously sharing everything with your wealth of knowledge and doing this for so long. And it's such an important topic. I feel like in our state, but not even our state, our whole country, right? I mean, this is going to be a big thing, I think, over the next year plus that is going to change a lot of things out there.
Oh yeah,
Um,
congratulations, New York, on that note. That's very exciting for you guys.
I didn't even know about that, so that's
Well,
awesome. Congrats,
yeah,
New York.
New York basically announced they're going legal almost immediately. They need to structure their ordinance, I think, too.
Yeah,
But speaking of which, I got a lot of people interested in being in New York. If you're a landlord and you think you might want to have a dispensary or grow, it's a really good time to have a conversation.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, great, man.
Thank you.
Let's do this again. This was a lot of fun.
Anytime, man. This really was actually a good conversation. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.